Denver has a new district attorney for the first time in 12 years. Newly elected Denver District Attorney Beth McCann introduces herself to Denver citizens and outlines her vision for the DA's office on this edition of Dialogue Denver DA. Hello everyone, I'm Tamara Banks. Welcome to this edition of Dialogue Denver DA, and I'm pleased to introduce to you our brand new District Attorney, Beth McCann. Beth, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's so great to have you on what really will be your show eventually. But I know a lot of people know a ton about you. You and I go way back. I remember, I think when I first started reporting in Denver, you were the manager of safety.
Yes.
So give us a little bit of background for folks who don't know all the great things you've done over your career.
Oh, thanks. Well, I started actually clerking for a judge. My legal career started here in Denver, and then I started in the DA's office. So really began my journey as a lawyer trying criminal cases as a deputy and then chief deputy district attorney, and learned a lot about how to conduct yourself in court, what justice is or what justice should be. And at that time, I remember thinking this is a job that I would really like someday, because being a prosecutor is really representing the people of the state in some of the most awful situations that citizens encounter. And so that was a real important learning and training ground for me. I then went into private practice of law for several years, became a partner in a law firm. And then when Mayor Webb was elected as mayor, he tapped me to be the manager of safety. So I was the first woman manager of safety for Denver, which was a fascinating job. If people don't know, that's the civilian head of the police, fire, and sheriff's departments. Mm-hmm. So issues run the gamut from police community relations to personnel issues in the fire, sheriff's, and police departments, large budget, a lot of city issues, so a lot of management experience. And then I was also director of excise and licensing for the city, and started the Safe City program. Right. When we had the Summer of Violence.
Right.
People who lived here then probably remember we had a lot of people being shot, a lot of gang activity.
It's like 1996.
93.
93. Mm-hmm.
So we went out into the community, into every city council district, and had big meetings with community members about how do we keep our kids out of gangs and drugs and violence. Mm-hmm. So we started the curfew program to bring kids into a safe environment at night in a rec center, and also to have their parents come or their guardians and figure out what's going on in the family, why is this kid out so late, and direct them to services. So we started that. We also had a grant program to put money back into the community for anti-violence efforts. And we actually reduced juvenile crime about over 20%. So I'm a big believer in working with young people, try to keep them out of gangs and drugs, violent behavior.
Right.
And then when Ken Salazar was elected Attorney General, I went over to work for him as the head of the civil law and employment law division. So I was supervising about 33 lawyers, and we handled cases, civil cases on behalf of the state. So a lot of litigation, a lot of interesting cases. Mm-hmm. Then when my state representative was term limited, I thought, well, I'll see if I'll throw my hat in the ring, because I was interested in an elected position and was successful in winning the primary, the Democratic primary for House District 8.
Yep, that's my district.
Yes.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. It's the great district, yeah. Central and Northeast Denver, and thoroughly enjoyed my work in the state legislature. But then when I knew Mitch was term limited, and this was a job that I had been interested in a long time. So I thought, well, I'll just give that a go as well, and was fortunate enough to be elected.
Right, and the rest is history.
Yes, this will be history.
Will be history, right.
Just started.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. So that's sort of the professional side. Who else besides your family has been big influencers in your life and career?
Well, I would say, going back to being in the DA's office, Dale Tooley was the DA that hired me. And he was very instrumental in making us understand that our job was to do justice. It wasn't all about how many convictions we could get or how many people we could put in jail. It was about what's the right way to handle a case. And so he was very much a mentoring influence. And then the judge that I clerked for, Judge Feinsilver, was also a mentor, just a really down-to-earth, solid judge. Again, kind of this philosophy of what's the right thing to do, because these decisions that we make are so impactful to individual lives. And then, of course, Mayor Webb and Wilma Webb were an inspiration in the way that they treated justice. And Wellington always asked, is it the right thing to do when he was deciding about something? And of course, Wilma was so persistent in getting the Martin Luther King Day holiday.
Right.
So I say those folks have all had a big influence.
Those are good influencers for sure.
Yeah, and then Ken Salazar too. I mean, you know, I've just worked for some wonderful people, and you know, Ken was a very influential Attorney General and just did a lot of really good things for our community.
Yeah.
So,
So here we are in 2017, and we're just now electing our first female district attorney. What are your thoughts around that? Does that weigh on you? Do you think there'll be differences? And do we see, I know men and women we have a different lens about issues. What are your thoughts and your feelings about your position with this frame?
well, I'm really honored to be the first woman DA. I do think that women bring a little bit more of a collaborative approach, and also perhaps more interest in the prevention of crime, not just prosecuting, but also prevention of crime. You know, women and children are victims of crime at an alarming rate, really. So I am very interested in domestic violence, sex assault, child abuse, crimes of that nature, elder abuse, because I think, you know, I see the harm that's done when people prey on other people, and the tremendous impact that a sexual assault, for example, can have on someone for the rest of their life. So, you know, the fundamental job is the same for a man or a woman, but I do think that I plan to do probably a little more emphasis on some of the prevention work and looking at criminal justice in a broader perspective rather than just, you know, getting that conviction.
Right, right. So on that note, what do you think will be some of your challenges that you'll be facing?
Well, I'm very interested in looking at our juvenile justice system and trying very hard to, in appropriate cases, provide alternatives for young people so that we can intervene at a time in their life when there's still an opportunity to change behavior, help them make better choices. So I want to get involved in the restorative justice program, getting that set up and expanded in Denver. And then, of course, the whole issue of mass incarceration, particularly of people of color, is one that is very troubling to me. We as a community, as a criminal justice system, need to be really looking at why is this happening? Is there bias in the system? How do we prevent it? How do we root it out? So I plan to really look internally in our office to see if we are treating people of different races, different sexual orientation, different gender differently, who have similar backgrounds. So that's going to be a real challenge.
Right, that's a hot topic. It's always has been, but now the more, you know, everybody has a cell phone, which means everybody has a camera, and so we're just seeing more of it and hearing more of it, even though it's been there for decades, generations.
And that kind of segues into the police-community relationship. And I'm very committed to trying to work with police department and the community to improve, that relationship. I go to a lot of neighborhood meetings. I certainly in the campaign talk to a lot of people about these issues. And there's a large segment of our city that doesn't believe that they get justice in our system, and that's not right. So we need to really look at that, try to increase the level of trust in the system, and make sure that what we're doing is not based on a biased approach. So that's a big challenge. I'm also very interested in the mental health aspects of criminal justice. We seem to be warehousing a lot of our people have mental health issues in our jails. And it's not good for the police, it's not good for the jailers, and it's not good for the people who have these issues. So we'll be looking at whether a mental health court would be a good way to approach some of those cases, providing other services for them other than just putting people in jail. I mean, jail's obviously appropriate for some situations.
Sure.
But often the police get called, when someone is acting out, maybe they're talking to themselves and walking down the street, doing things.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a criminal act, but people don't know what to do except call the police.
Right.
So looking at those kinds of situations will be important.
Right. Well, when we come back, I want to talk to you more about some of the legislation that you've already accomplished and been successful at turning bills into laws, and that might actually have helped lay down a foundation for some of the work you'll be doing in the future. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment with Beth McCann on this edition of Dialogue Denver DA. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Tamara Banks. This is the portion of the show where we talk about a legal term. And today's legal term is arraignment. And that's when a defendant appears in court to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. So, Beth, that's sort of self-explanatory, but can you sort of expand on what that really means for folks?
Sure. It's kind of an important procedure in the criminal system. So if you're able to work out a plea agreement where the person will plead guilty to, say, a lesser offense, that can take place right there at the arraignment. Typically, people will enter a not guilty plea, and then the case will get set for trial. There's still the opportunity for a plea agreement to be negotiated after that entry of a not guilty plea. But the preference is if you can do it early, and so get that done in the beginning of the case. The arraignment's really the beginning of the case.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So let's get back to talking about you and the experience you bring to the table. You were state representative for 8 years.
Yes.
In District 8. Tell us some of the key things that you thought were the most important issues that you dealt with.
So for my own personal bills, I did a big human trafficking bill, which restructured the law around human trafficking, made it stronger and more effective in prosecuting human traffickers. It also set up a statewide human trafficking council that's working on human trafficking issues. So that was a very important bill. I also did a bill that provides due process for kids who are facing charges as adults in the criminal system. Before the bill, it was completely up to the DA whether to charge a kid in district court, adult court, or juvenile court. And it matters because if you're in the adult system, you end up with a felony and your sentence is into the Department of Corrections, the prison system. In juvenile court, the penalties aren't as high, and you don't end up with something, it's called an adjudication. It's not the same as a felony conviction. So I forgot what I was going to say next, but anyway, that was an important bill that I did, and it was opposed by most of the DAs. And then, but the governor signed it. We got it passed. It was a bipartisan bill. We had Republican support as well as Democratic. It changed the way juveniles are handled in our courts. And I also did a couple of the gun safety bills. So I sponsored the bill to provide for universal background checks with guns, and then another bill to help empower judges to make sure people convicted of domestic violence don't have guns, because we know that's a very dangerous situation in domestic violence. And I also did a bill to address some of the foreclosure abuses. My district had a lot of foreclosures, and did a bill to provide more due process for people going through foreclosures, because it's really a dramatic impact if you lose your home.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You lose the very thing that you think is safe and a safe place to be. Yeah.
So,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I did another bill to prohibit solitary confinement for juveniles, except in extraordinary circumstances, emergencies.
Some really key stuff. So moving in back to your new job. So as I mentioned earlier in the show, it's 12 years since there's been a change. Will there be changes? What does that look like? What can people expect?
Well, I think I've talked a little bit about some of my priorities, and I think that my priorities are going to be a little bit different than the previous DA. And he did a great job with DNA evidence, for example, and the crime lab, and helped get funding for the new domestic violence center, the Rose Andom Center. And I'm going to have probably a little more emphasis on prevention of crime, juvenile justice, and looking at the criminal justice system in a little bit broader perspective, like I mentioned. And I plan to be out in the community a lot. I'm used to being in the community. And I think that the DA's office sometimes is viewed as kind of insular. We're focused on our cases and we're not really out in the community. So I'd like to change that so that we're transparent and accountable, and people know what we're doing and know how to get hold of us.
Right.
So I think there'll be some changes.
And then with the work that you did as a state representative, say, for example, with human trafficking, will that also be sort of your focus, one of the focuses and priorities for your work as a district attorney?
Absolutely. In fact, I just met with our human trafficking person in the DA's office and talked a little bit about how we can make that position effective and make sure that we are working closely with law enforcement to prevent human trafficking.
And just sort of, if we can drill down a little bit on human trafficking, I think people would really be shocked how frequently that occurs, that this is a real thing happening. It's not just something you might read about every once in a while. Can you sort of put into context how prevalent human trafficking is?
So more than we would think. It's often runaway kids or kids who are in the foster system who are easy targets, if you will, for people who are interested in trafficking. So they will target these kids and befriend them and offer them, food and alcohol and drugs, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So the young person gets kind of sucked into it early on, and then becomes involved in either sexual behavior or labor trafficking also is another issue here as well.
And I know you have we talked earlier, maybe it was during the break, about making sure that we focus on young people.
Yes.
For, intervention, prevention before it gets to the point where they're older, and then we really have some serious problems with serious consequences.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. If we can identify kids who could benefit from some support and some guidance early on, then we don't see them in the criminal system later. I mean, that's only true for some people. I mean, there are obviously dangerous young people who need to be out of society because they are dangerous. But there are others who make stupid choices, like all kids do.
Right,
and,
right.
we need to catch them early enough to help them make better choices.
Will you carry on some pieces of the legacy of the previous leadership, like the DNA
Sure,
component?
of course, yes. We will continue to use DNA evidence. Mitch started an effective cold case unit. I'm very impressed with the work that they're doing to solve cold cases and bring those cases actually to trial, or at least get a plea. So we'll continue that. And as I mentioned, the Rose Andom Center, which is the Domestic Violence Center, I want to see that expand and be used even more than it currently is. So it just opened in April last year. So there's plenty of opportunity to continue that work. So yeah.
So we talked about priorities, which is always fun to talk about when you're just getting into a job that's a little bit different than goals. Do you have a sense of what some of your goals might be looking like? What does the first 100 days of Beth McCann look like, or the first year, or that sort of thing? Have you kind of thought about that?
Well, I'd like to have established this juvenile restorative justice program in a little more, expanding it a little bit more. I also am planning to provide a book to my deputies called The New Jim Crow.
Oh, I've read that. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a very powerful book.
Absolutely.
And I want to encourage them to read that and think about how bias has played into our system. So I'm hoping that we will have some cultural competency training so that we make sure we aren't engaging in bias. So that would be another thing. And then exploring this possibility of having the mental health treatment be a little more effective. There's a program, it's a great program the Denver Police are participating in called the Co-Responder Program. And that involves the Mental Health Center of Denver has given or loaned 6 mental health workers to the police department. And those folks go out on a call with officers when they think it's a mental health call. So they can intervene and direct the person into the mental health system instead of the criminal justice system. And the statistics so far are very encouraging about the success of getting people into mental health treatment instead of into the criminal system. So I'd like to work on getting that program expanded and making sure that we continue to look at how do we make our system work better for everyone,
Right.
From a little bit broader perspective.
I remember shortly after Paul Childs was killed, a young African American boy who was, I think, 14 or so, 13, 14, maybe in that age range, and he had mental challenges, and no one understood what that looked like back in the early 2000s. And so then there was a program by which, okay, let's train our police officers to become competent in identifying what a mentally challenged person does. So we're piling all these things on police officers, right? Be, serve and protect, and now also you're a psychologist, psychiatrist. So that program where you have somebody, a partner, who is actually trained in that area come out seems much more effective.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great program, and it helps the police as well, because then they don't, ordinarily they'd have to take the person in to an emergency room or the police station.
Right.
And now that they don't have to spend the time and energy on an issue that's really a mental health issue.
Yeah.
And it frees them up to handle more significant problems.
So in the last 3-4 minutes we have here, I'm curious if there's a message you want to share with your constituents in Denver about what they can expect. I mean, this whole conversation has sort of been that, but anything that we've missed that you'd like to sort of hone in on that folks would be interested in?
I think, as I said, being a prosecutor is representing the people in situations where members of our community have been victims of crime. And I want people to know that we will continue to be aggressive in prosecuting those who commit particularly violent, dangerous crimes. And then we will also be putting resources toward finding alternatives for people who can benefit from mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, or young people who can benefit from tutoring or support in that way. So we're going to be looking at criminal justice with a wide lens and trying to prevent crime so we don't have as much of it, and also punish it when it does occur. So we'll continue to do both.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I know a lot of people will be happy to hear about the focus on young people, that getting to these young folks before they're put in a position to make the best decisions they can possibly make, versus having to go down a wrong path.
Yeah, that's where we'll be putting some energy into those kinds of programs and working hard to keep our city safe for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And one last question about some of the partnerships you might have outside of the Denver area, with your, district attorneys in other parts of the metro area. Is that an important?
Oh yes, and I didn't mention that. That is one change from the prior administration. There's a statewide organization called the Colorado District Attorneys Council, and the DA's office in Denver has not been a member of that for many years. It used to be, and then my predecessor withdrew from it. And so we are going back into the CDAC so that Denver can be a participant in these statewide issues. We get involved in lobbying or being down at the Capitol, helping lawmakers understand the criminal system. And the CDAC also provides excellent training for young lawyers and new lawyers, and so we'll be able to participate in those trainings, which will be great. And then we'll be partnering too with some of the social work agencies or social agencies that work in the juvenile justice area, as well as victims' rights groups. There are several victims' rights groups that I've already met with and that we will be working with to make sure that we preserve and listen to victims in the criminal justice system.
That's great, because a lot of times they just kind of get either re-victimized or just forgotten altogether.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And
My pleasure.
Congratulations on your new gig.
Yeah,
it's going to be fun, I'm sure. Fun,
Yeah.
Air quotes fun, right?
Yes, it's a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all you've done for the city and county of Denver and the state of Colorado.
Thank you.
Again, congratulations. Thanks to Denver's new district attorney, Beth McCann, for sharing with us her plans and hopes for the DA's office. We wish you great success in the future. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.